Hi, today I'm going to be showing you how to do the basic flat even count peyote stitch. This is a great stitch for beginner beaders, and it's also a great jumping off point to the more advanced peyote stitches. So to do this stitch today, I'm using size 10 Delica beads in 2 different colors to easily show you the pattern. You can use Japanese round seed beads if you choose, but the Delicas just sit really nice together, so they kind of like link up together like little bricks. For my beading thread, I'm going to be using the Fireline 6-pound Fireline in the black, and then as an optional, I have some beading wax that you can use to condition your beading thread. Normally, I find that I don't need to with Fireline, but if you're going to be using like a Nymo or some kind of other beading thread or 1G, it's always good to condition your beading thread so that it doesn't get snagged in your pattern. I have a size 12 tulip beading needle, but you can also use a size 10 or even a size 11 if you like. And then I have Xeron cutters. I like to use the Xeron cutters with the Fireline as it makes a nice clean cut. But if you're using a different type of thread like a 1G or something like that, you can just use beading scissors to go ahead and cut your thread. And then I have a bead in a different color for my stop bead. So let's get started. Okay, so to begin my stitch, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up an even amount of beads because this is flat even count peyote. And I'm going to have my column be 8 beads wide, but again, you can make yours as wide as you like. Just make sure that it's an even number. So I went ahead and I put about 3 feet of beading thread on my needle, and I'm going to go ahead and put on my stop bead. So I'm just going to pick up my stop bead. I'm going to bring it down to where I have about 12 inches or so of beading thread to leave a tail, and then I'm going to go back up through the bead. So then this way the thread is looping around that seed bead, if you can kind of see that, and it creates a nice little rest for the rest of your beads. So your pattern will kind of sit up against that, and it will help you create tension and just keep your beads on there until you've stitched up a couple of rows, and then it just holds it together. So, and we do remove this at the end when we go ahead and do the other end of the clasp. So to begin my pattern, I'm going to pick up an alternating colors of the Delicas. So I'm going to do 8 beads. So I'll do 1 cream, 1 turquoise, and then 1 cream. So just alternating the pattern until I have 8 beads across. And then it will just make it easier for you guys to see the stitches as we're going along. All right, so I've got my 8 beads, and I'm going to go ahead and just bring them down to my stop bead here. So these beads here, these 8 beads, will create the first 2 rows of your peyote stitch. So to jump up to the 3rd row, I'm going to pick up 1 cream bead. I'm going to skip over this last turquoise Delica, and I'm going to go under the cream Delica next to it. Just pop up, just going through that cream Delica there, and then pull everything down here. Once I get it nice and tight, I will show you. So see, the turquoise is sitting on top of the cream from the other row. So I'm just going to continue in that fashion going across here, but now I'm ready to pick up a cream one because I want the cream to sit on top of that turquoise. So skipping over that turquoise, I'm going to go down through the next cream one. Just popping that up and then seating that bead. Whoops. So there, I've got my next little row. So continuing that same fashion, I'm going to go ahead and pick up a cream bead. I'm going to skip over that turquoise and then go through the next cream bead. This is why the Delicas are so nice, because they really do lock together like little bricks and just makes for a really nice, clean looking pattern. So, whoops. And sometimes it gets a little twisted there, so you just kind of have to like maneuver it. You can see my little guys are all over the place here. So, on my next spot here, I'm going to jump out of this cream bead, skip over the turquoise, and go through that cream bead. So I'm going to grab 1 more cream, and then we'll turn and jump up to the next row. Taking care not to go through your stop bead there at the end, because that's not actually part of your stitch. kind of flipped over there a little bit. So see, now I've got my first 3 rows here, and now I'm going to jump up to my next row. So I'm coming out this last delicate cream, and I'm going to pick up a turquoise, and then I'm going to go through that next cream. Making sure you just go through the one delicate bead that's popped up there. So now that turquoise is linked in there, you're going to skip through that one that you went through, skip over this guy, and go through this one, picking up another turquoise. So you're coming out this cream, skip over this cream one, pick up another turquoise, and go through the next one that is popped up. Just continue one more time. And as you can see, like once you get your first couple rows done, it really does link up really nice and sits tight together. So it's a lot easier to keep continuing your stitch. So now I'm ready to turn and do my next row. So I'm going to jump up, grab a turquoise, and go through the turquoise next to it. Coming out that turquoise, skipping over the cream, going through the next turquoise. Coming out this turquoise, skip over that cream and go through the next turquoise. And then I've got one more to add there. So pick up one more turquoise, going through the last turquoise, and then we'll jump up to the next row. Okay, so now I'm going to just jump up to the next row, and I'm going to grab a cream bead, and I'm just going to add a delica to each of these little delicas here that are seated in. So coming out the end here, skipping that last bead, going through the turquoise one. Just going to pull everything down. You always want to pull your beading thread really tight because you want to keep nice even tension so that everything locks up nice and tight here. So coming out this turquoise, I'm going to skip over this one turquoise, pick up a cream, and go through the next one that is popped up there. And I'm just going to continue that pattern. Just adding a cream to each of the ones that are seated a little farther down. There, I've got my next row. So now you can kind of see you've got like a little pattern forming here of the stripes. You've got the stripe of cream, the stripe of blue, and then the stripe of cream. So this next row, just jumping up, I'm going to grab a cream, and then I'm going to go through this cream that's popped up there. And then just add another one. Whoops, make sure I only pick up one bead here. Pick up one more. Again, just in the same fashion as you're coming out the one that's popped up, skipping over the one that is seated down, and then go through the next one that is popped up there. And you just keep continuing this pattern until you make a bracelet that is as long as you like. Alright, so I've got my next row done, and then I'm just going to turn and start my other row here. This one's going to be all turquoise. So, skipping over that last one there, coming out, picking up a turquoise and going through the cream that is popped up there to start the turquoise row. And then pick up another one, coming out this bead, skipping over that bead, and going through the next one that's popped up. And then just continue in this fashion until you've added a bead to each little recession in here in your pattern. And I've got one more. All right, so I've got that row. And I just turn and do in the same fashion, go back the other way. Pick up a delica. And if your beads ever kind of get like that, where it's like the pattern or the row below it starts to get a little loose, just make sure you've pulled everything tight, and then you can always pull on this end to make sure your stop bead's really nice and tight there. So just continuing in that same fashion, coming out this bead, skipping over this bead, and going through the next turquoise that's popped up there. And really on this pattern, you're just always going through the beads that are popped up and skipping over the ones that are recessed in. Add one more, and then I'm ready to turn. All right, so there I've got my turquoise row, and now I'm ready to add my cream row. So again, coming out this bead, skipping over it, and coming in the first turquoise bead that's popped up there. It's popped up. Then coming out that bead, skipping over this one, and going through the next turquoise that is popped up. And I'm going to just continue this pattern. So as you can see, is once you get going, once you get your peyote stitch established, it really does whip up pretty quickly. So it's a great stitch, like I said, for beginners to kind of get your bead weaving skills in line there. So I've got that row done. Now I'm just going to turn and add the cream to the next row. And you really can do any kind of pattern that you want with these. I just chose to do these two colors to kind of help the contrast to see the pattern. Just again, make sure you pull everything nice and tight and snug each time so that everything locks in together. All right, so now I've got a fairly good start here. So I'm just going to continue to stitch up a little bit, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so now I'm at a point where I need to go ahead and add a new working thread. So you want to stop where you have at least about 6 inches of working thread, and you want to make sure that you are coming out of the end bead here on a row. So you just want to make sure you finish your row. So to weave this working thread in, I'm going to weave this in first, and then I'll add another thread. So continue on with my pattern. You just want to go ahead and turn down into the next row and just weave through that row. So you're going to go through the next bead down and then the bead next to it. And you're just going to weave this back and forth, your tail back and forth, just kind of keeping the same like basic pattern there. So now my thread's coming out of this bead here, and I'm just going to continue to go through these next turquoise beads. And given the nature of peyote stitch, weaving this back in, you don't have to add any like half-hitch knots or anything, because weaving it back in, it's got enough little turns there that it really anchors it down. So you can go through one row. I always like to go through a second row just for good measure myself. So I'm going to turn and go down the next row next to it. Just continuing to go through the same beads that would have been in that row. So coming out this bead and going through the next. Just going to go through all the cream beads and popping out. And then I'm going to go through these last 4 cream beads. And it can sometimes be a little harder to get down through those rows, but most of the time you can pop up through there. So got those, and now we're just going to go through those last 2 cream. All right, so I've gone through 2 rows, so I feel like I've really secured my working thread. So now I can just go ahead and take my cutters and just trim it off as close to the beadwork as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. And just for the ease of the video, I've already threaded a new needle with some beading thread, but again, you can just use your same needle and just thread on another length of beading thread so you can continue your pattern. So to add a thread, I always like to come down a couple of rows, and come in. So I'm going to come in through this turquoise here. And then you're just going to stair step up until you're coming out this turquoise bead here so that you can turn up and do your next pattern. So you're just going to kind of stair step up through the beads here a little bit. So you can see I'm coming in that turquoise and going through the cream next to it. And then I pull my thread down and I want to leave a little bit of a tail. And then I'm going to hold on to that tail just to make sure I keep good tension. I'm just going to kind of tuck that behind there. And I'm going to just continue to stair step up so that I come out that bead up there. So I'm going to go through this next cream. Then I'm going to jump up to the turquoise next to it. So I'm going up through the next cream, the turquoise there. Pulling it down here. And then I'm going to go down here through this one. I'm getting a little too far up there, so I'm going to go through this next couple creams. And now I'm just going to jump up to this cream, this turquoise, and I'm going to come out. So I'm coming out that turquoise there. And I actually need to be over on this side, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn and go through that last row that I added, just so that I'm going in the right, so I come out the right one. So I always like to, when I add a thread or end a thread, I always like to go through 2 rows and do a turn on the side. That just makes me feel like it's a little bit more secure, and I know that my beading thread is not going to pull through or anything. So I'm just continuing to go through that last row that I made here. I'm going to come out that turquoise. So now I'm ready to jump up and continue my stitch. And to do that, I'm just going to grab a cream and go through this next cream here. And just continue on my pattern. Making sure you pull everything nice and tight so everything locks into place. Okay, so as you can see, I've got it started there. It's nice and secure, so I can, at this point, I could go ahead and cut my tail that I left there, or I can do that at the end, but I'm going to go ahead and cut it now so that way it doesn't get tangled. Again, cutting it as closely to the beadwork as possible. And then I can just go ahead and continue on my pattern. Okay, so we've covered basic flat even count peyote stitch. I've shown you how to end a thread and how to add a thread in your beadwork. So at this point, I would just continue on my pattern until it's my desired length. But you can find this technique and lots of other techniques at fusionbeads.com.